Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And we've hit 10,000 subscribers! Wow, we're in 5 digits! Whoa! So I decided I'm making this random video for the hell of it to celebrate the occasion. So, I am counting down my favorite electronic albums of 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and even a redux of the best of 2015 updated for 5 years later as a bonus. Because I felt like doing that. Now, as you can tell from the fact that I'm recording on my phone, this video is very rough and not well thought out. These lists are like just thrown together ad nauseum. Like, I basically went through my iTunes library like a week ago, sorted it by year, and just kind of like sussed these out over the next couple of days without thinking it through super deeply or giving all these projects like super in-depth listens, because this milestone actually kind of snuck up on me, to be honest. A bunch of these albums I haven't properly listened to in a long time. Like, I'm mainly just going by memory more than anything. I did kind of iTunes preview through some of the ones that weren't as fresh in my mind to make sure I thought they were worthy. I'll let you know if I'm iffy on them. Though I'm sure if I were to really go a lot more in depth than this, my thoughts wouldn't diverge too much from what I have here, but yeah, don't take these too seriously. I just threw these together. I don't even have a proper script for this, aside from this intro where I just have up here. Any commentary is just going to be totally off the cuff and likely not very coherent. And to make things easier for me to edit, I decided to not even play clips of the albums. I'll just be reading them off over my own music and giving like little comments here and there and stuff. Very much a lazy, quickly thrown together video, something I did just for a bit of fun to celebrate a subscriber milestone I never would have believed I'd get to. Just random off-the-cuff opinions that you can feel free to disagree with, and all the rest of the disclaimers that you see on these lists and stuff. So yeah, may as well get into it. So we're starting off with the top 10 best electronic albums of 2010. And I will say right off the bat, 2010 was a really good year for electronic music. A whole bunch of my all-time favorites are here. The bunch that got on the best of the decade list. And like there were like what 5-6 albums from this year that made it onto the best of the decade list. Not just me, but also from Landon when we did that video together. So yeah, that's cool. I mean, all of these honorable mentions I have here are great. These are ones that did not make the cut for 2010. The Black Dog, Music for Real Airports, Blue Tech, Love Songs to the Source, Carbon-Based Lifeforms, Interloper, Caribou, Swim, Daft Punk, Tron Legacy soundtrack, Gabriel Lamar, Jump Cuts, Oneohtrix Point Never, Returnal, The Orb and David Gilmour, Metallic Spheres, Pendulum Immersion. That's how good this year was, by the way. Pendulum didn't make the list. Skrillex, Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites EP, and Traffic, None But the Brave. By the way, definitely check that one out. That one's really underrated. Almost made the list because, you know, no one talks about Traffic, and I really wish they would release another album at some point, but yeah. And as for the list proper, for number 10, I went with The Polish Ambassador, First Words. Yeah, that was the one that made Best of the Decade. That's only number 10 for this year. That's a good sign, I would say. At number 9, I have Tipper, Broken Soul Jamboree. That should be pretty obvious if you have heard that one at least. Go check it out. Number 8, The Chemical Brothers, Further. Number 7, LCD Sound System, This Is Happening. Another really obvious one. Number 6, Bonobo, Black Sands. Number 5, Sounds from the Ground, The Maze. They're gonna pop up quite a bit, as you might guess. Number 4, I went with Fortet's There Is Love in You. Number 3, I went with Flying Lotus, Cosmogramma. Number 2, Hybrid, Disappear Here. And number 1, to the surprise of absolutely nobody, BT, These Hopeful Machines. Because, of course, duh. Alright, next up, here's my top 10 best electronic albums of 2011. Like, 2010 was an incredible year for electronic music. 2011, not so much. It was an alright year, I guess, but I think of all the years in the 2010s decade, this was probably the weakest year for electronic music. Possibly. Like, some of these honorable mentions are just kind of iffy and pushing it. So, the honorable mentions that I went with, let's see here. Black Mill's Miracle. I've very rarely listened to that one aside from the songs The Drift and Lucid Truth, though I did kind of preview through the rest of that one and it still mostly seems to hold up, so that's a good one. DJ Shadow, The Less You Know The Better. Serious Mo, Mosaic. Solar Fields, Until We Meet the Sky. I guess I can throw in Macintosh plus Floral Shop. I do come back to that one every now and then, even though I don't love that album. And same with Vectroid Star Calc. Not sure which one I would say I enjoy more. I haven't listened to Star Calc in its entirety in a very, very long time. Nicholas Jar, Space's Only Noise. Another one that, that's a good one, but probably would not have gotten a mention in a better year. I'll throw in C418's Minecraft Volume Alpha because I'm sure people would bug me about that if I didn't. I thought about adding Coldplay Milo Xyloto because I really love that one, but ultimately I decided that's still like a rock band dipping their toes into electronic. It's close to electronic music, I'm not sure if it's close enough, but yeah, Milo Xyloto is Coldplay's best album, Don't At Me. Oh yeah, and this was also the year that I released my own best album, Marble Jars, so shameless plug there too. So yes, here's the best albums of 2011 in my opinion. So number 10, I picked Biosphere End Plants. Number 9, I went with Spunkshine Huge Humans. Yeah, Spunkshine's great. Number 8, Bjork Biophilia. That was another one that was like kind of on the fringe, and I haven't listened to that one in its entirety in a while, but that one does sound really freaking cool. This is one of her more underrated projects, I think. Let's see here. Number 7. Number 7 is Amon Tobin's ISAM. Number 6 is Noct Plank Broad Tape Band. Another super underrated one, just like lo-fi ambient type stuff that you should definitely check out. Number 5, I went with Rusty Glass Swords. Number 4, I went with Tim Hecker, Rave Death 1972. I think that's a pretty obvious one. Number 3, I went with Ace Dana, Parameters. Still one of my favorite albums from that guy, even though it's not really one of his more popular ones. Number 2, I went with One Tricks Point Never, Replica, because of course. Who wouldn't put that on here? And number 1, I went with M83, Hurry Up We're Dreaming. I know I was pushing it with the Coldplay one, but M83 are electronic, first and foremost. I consider them, and dipping their toes into rock with this one. But yeah, that's the best ones of 2011. Not a great year, it definitely had its moments. There were definitely projects from this year that stuck out. Now, 2012, though, that year, I didn't really remember what that year was like, but going through what came out that year, and I'm like, holy crap, this was a really freaking good year, 2012 was. There are a couple of honorable mentions that I think are just good and are not quite great, but this was a really solid one. About roughly on par with, I would say, 2018 maybe. Probably a little better than 2018 as well. 2018 was kind of an underrated year for electronic music, I would say. The honorable mentions, let's see here. I have Monolake's Ghosts. I have Solar Fields' Random Friday. The Future Sound of London, Environments 4. Air's Les Voyages dans la Lune. Still really miss those guys. If they had released like an actual album after this, maybe this wouldn't have gotten the mention, but definitely was listening to this one a lot that year. Cell Dweller, Wish Upon a Black Star. Another one I haven't listened to in a while, but still mostly holds up from what I like iTunes previewed and stuff. Connect.ohm, 9980. This was still in Ultimate Records in their good period. Odessa, Summer's Gone. Yeah, I can give Odessa a shout. This was their good album, and then they kind of just trailed off, and I stopped being interested in their stuff afterwards. After that, In Return and A Moment Apart are very overrated in my opinion, but Summer's Gone still holds up. Let's see here. Dead album title goes here. You know, obvious to pick Dead, but that album still holds a special place in my heart, honestly. We got Elliot Lip, Shark, Wolf, Rabbit, Snake. You know, not one that gets mentioned much these days. Elliot Lip's pretty underrated, though. I remember really listening to this one when I was big in my Pretty Lights phase and stuff. That was in that whole Pretty Lights music camp. Frontline Assembly, Airmac, and then Norkin and Deer, Micro Dun one. So those are the honorable mentions for 2012. That's 10? No, 11? Yeah, 11 honorable mentions for 2012. So yeah, here's the list proper. So for number 10, I went with Clark, Iradelphic. Maybe a bit of a arbitrary pick there, but it felt right, I guess. Number 9, I went with C418-1. That's one I feel have a little more solid thoughts on that one than I do for Minecraft Volume Alpha. Number 8, I have Kenny He presents Metropolitan Harmonic Formulas, I think. The Music for Daydreams is the name of the album. That's a very nice deep house jazzy thing. Number 7, I went with Zed, Clarity. Another artist that wish he had fulfilled his potential more. Number 6, I have Square Pusher, Eufabulum. Really underrated Square Pusher album. Number 5, of course, we have Orbital's Wonky. That was definitely my most listened to album of that year when that came out. By a long shot. It still mostly holds up if you ask me. Number 4, I have BT, If the Stars Are Eternal, So Are You and I. Of course. Number 3, I have Sounds from the Ground, Wider World. That's definitely one of their best ones. Number 2, I have Michael Menert, Even If It Isn't Right. That one still holds up. And at number 1, I have Zircon, Identity Sequence. Zircon's another artist that I really wish would come back. Alright, so yeah, 2012, that was a pretty solid year. That's a pretty good year for electronic music. But that is nothing compared to 2013. 2013 is definitely the best year for electronic music out of the entire 2010s decade. There are so freaking many great projects, and tons of great projects that I didn't even mention here. How many honorable mentions is that? 10, 13, 14? There's a lot. First, I'll give a brief shout to the Michael Menert's Elements EP, which I did not put on the main one because it was just an EP, but that's probably my personal favorite EP of all time. You can take that with a grain of salt because I don't really listen to EPs, but Michael Menert was on a fucking other level with this EP. And actual albums: Disclosure Settle, Cascades Atmosphere, Bonobo The North Borders, Daft Punk Random Access Memories, OMD English Electric, Pet Shop Boys Electric, Boards of Canada Tomorrow's Harvest. That one's still pretty good. I'm not sure if that one's great, but I figure people would get mad at me if I didn't mention it. The Drum, 7 Lies, Eco Virtual, Atmospheres 1, Knocked Plank, Echo Arc, another underrated one. St. Pepsi, Hit Vibes. I mainly just like the track better on that one, but yeah, the album's still pretty good. And Music, Chewed Corners. Oh, and I guess I can throw in, I guess I can shameless plug Inside the Mainframe for the hell of it. So that's very stacked. Lots and lots of great albums there. But as for the list proper, here's what I went through. There's a whole bunch from like my favorites of all time list on this one. Number 10, I decided on Tim Hecker's Virgins. Could probably trade that one with one of the honorable mentions if I wanted to, but that's just the pick I went with for now. Number 9, I have Break Science, 7 Bridges. Another Pretty Lights Music one, definitely holds up. Number 8, I have Autumn of Communion with Autumn of Communion 2. Another favorites of all time list one. Number 7, I have Bibio, Silver Wilkinson. Number 6, I have Nightmares on Wax, Feeling Good. Still very much my musical mac and cheese. I love going back to that one. Number 5, I have Coma Duster, Hollow Worlds, of course. And in a weaker year, that would have been much higher, but, you know, I also think Solace and Darker Matter kind of expand on a lot of what this does. Still definitely very, very good album. Number 5, I just did my number 5. Number 4, Pretty Lights, Color Map of the Sun. If this had been in 2013, that would have been my number 1 pick. No question, but I have definitely overplayed this album. Still gotta put it pretty high because of how much of a personal impact it had. Number 3, I'm going with Oudaker's Exi, because of course. Number 2, John Hopkins' Immunity. And number 1, Oneohtrix Point Never, R+7. That is a freaking stacked year. Next up is 2014. So this year was interesting. I used to think that this was a really weak year for electronic music when it actually was 2014. Maybe because like that was the year of David Guetta's Listen or something. But actually looking back on it, there were a lot of really good ones. And, like, this was also like an especially good year for like mainstream EDM and stuff like that. So as for my honorable mentions, we got Clark's self-titled. We have Basement Jaxx's Junto. That definitely would have been on the list proper had it actually been in 2014, because that was in the peak of my Basement Jaxx phase, and I still really miss those guys. When are they gonna release a new album? Not one of their better ones, but still very good album, I would say. We got Lee Anthony Norris, Italian Works, Vanity Fantasy, Tycho Awake, another one kind of pushing it, but yeah, that one mostly holds up. Zircon Getaway EP, Hong Kong Express Romantic Dream, The Noisy Freak, Straight Life. That obviously had not heard that one in 2014. That one stuck with me as I've listened to it more over the course of this year. I heard it for the first time this year. Same with Haywire Twofold Part 1. Yeah, that one's pretty good. That one's pretty damn good. And finally, Circular Moon Pool is the last honorable mention. And you know, there's others that I didn't mention. I didn't mention Porter Robinson's Worlds. That I don't know if I don't think I personally enjoy that one enough to put it on here. And I haven't heard Culprate's Deliverance yet. I've gotten a ton of requests to look at that one, so you can look forward to that one in the next Some Stuff I Missed. I put it in there. I haven't heard that one yet, but I've heard a lot of good things about it, so hopefully I really enjoy that one and that comment doesn't age poorly. So as for the list proper, at number 10, I picked Elliot Lipp, Watch the Shadows. That is basically the swan song to the whole Pretty Lights music era for me, but still very much an album that holds up for me now. Number 9, I went with Knife Party Abandon Ship. That album still totally kicks ass to this day. Number 8, Aphex Twin Cyro. I'm still not totally sure if I consider that album properly great. It's like borderline, like solid 8 maybe at this point. And I still think it absolutely would not get as much hype if it didn't have the name Aphex Twin on it. But yeah, this one is still a massive grower, and I mean, it was the last thing that Aphex Twin has put out that I think is on that almost great level, that I would say. Anyway, number 7 is Clean Bandit, New Eyes. That one does kind of make me sad nowadays, because I know that they fucking squandered their potential, but the album itself still totally holds up. Number 6, I have Flying Lotus, You're Dead, of course. Number 5, definitely would not have had this in the actual year because I hadn't heard it at the time, but I have Erasure, The Violet Flame. That album is really freaking good. It's really freaking good. Number 4, I have Arca Zen, of course. Number 3, Deadmau5, While 1 is Less Than 2. I don't know what to say. Still Deadmau5's best work, obviously. Number 2, I went with Asura Radio Universe, the end of the era for Ultimate Records for me. And at number 1, I would have to go with The Future Sound of London Environments 5. That was a really solid, like, late period return to form kind of thing. FSOL, man. So now, with all that out of the way, we finally make it to my favorite albums of 2015, 5 years later. Now, the reason I wanted to do this one is because, I mean, I do obviously already have the video for my top 10 favorite albums of 2015, but I am not at all happy with that list from today's standards. I mean, I feel like I was cheating for a lot of it. Like, there are 2 picks where I decided to make them ties, and the number 1 was BT's Electronic Opus, which is a greatest hits with an orchestra, and I feel like that is also cheating. And on top of that, I feel like just with the honorable mention picks and some of the actual picks for the list, I feel like that list was the original list was almost kind of like an excuse to name drop all my favorite artists than it was like something that actually does the year justice, because 2015 was a pretty good year for electronic music. Certainly not the worst of this decade. But the actual, if you were to go by the list I made back then, I would have thought that 2015 was the worst year for electronic music of the decade, because a lot of those picks don't hold up nearly as well as they did when I made that video. The list would be quite different. I have a bunch of the same picks. Some of the ones that I hadn't heard back in the day yet. I had not yet heard Floating Point's Elania. I had not heard Cell Dweller's End of an Empire. I had not heard Elon Moore's Masters of the Human Imagination. I had not heard Death's Dynamic Shroud, I'll Try Living Like This. I actually haven't heard that one in a while, but I briefly previewed throughout that one, and that one still seems to hold up. I think that was a really freaking good one when I heard it. I also think Holly Herndon's Platform was pretty good. That can get a little shout. And other ones that probably were not good enough to make the list in retrospect. Prodigy Days of My Enemy almost made the list again, but ultimately, there was other better ones. Same with Jean-Michel Jarre's Electronica 1 The Time Machine, 2814, Birth of a New Day. 01 Signals also, that definitely would not have gotten a mention in a better year, a stronger year. That's probably my least favorite 01 album in retrospect, but I definitely will say that 01 deserves a mention because he is super underrated. Yeah, that album is still pretty good. So as for what I think the actual album would be now, 5 years later, for number 10, I would put One Tricks Point Never Garden of Delete. Lower than it was before, but, you know, that one still holds up, and I agree with the things I said back then. Same with number 9, Magic Sound Fabric Lucid. That one still definitely holds up. Number 8 is Paul Hartnell's 858. That one doesn't hold up nearly as well. I used to have that one at number 2, but I don't listen to it even close to as much as I did back in the day, because now Monsters Exist came out, and that kind of supplanted it. And 858, by comparison, kind of feels like a foundation for a really good album, but ultimately, like, it's a lot more simplistic than the actual Orbital albums, and doesn't quite hit the same level for me. Still very solid album, obviously, still made the list proper. But above it, I put Sounds from the Ground Alchemy at number 7. I decided that one does, in fact, qualify as 2015, even if I wasn't sure about it at the time. because that was the year the digital version dropped, and then everyone could listen to it instead of whoever happened to get the limited edition vinyl that dropped the year previous. But yeah, Alchemy, that was a really nice little micro house thing that they did. Number 6, I put Madion Adventure. That one was only an honorable mention at the time, but that one's really stood the test of time. Then the next couple of picks have not actually changed at all. At number 5, I still have Michael Menard's Space Jazz, number 4, Black Dog Neither Neither, and number 3, The Orb Moon Building 2703 AD. All those picks, still the same as my original list, I think. But the next, the number 2 and number 1 picks are not the same. The number 2, I have Sakura Burst's Deconstructing Nature. I only heard this album for the first time this year when me and Landon were doing the Best of the Decade video, but that album is really, really freaking good. Someone Patreon requests that album for me. Like, that album, like, predates the whole upscale movement and, like, the combining IDM and ambient with much more, modern EDM type synth tones and stuff. It is, like, super creative, and the atmosphere is fucking impeccable, and, like, this was absolutely incredible album, I have to say. But it's not my number 1. Number 1, I went with this project that I really loved at the time, and has stood the test of time and become influential in a way that I didn't expect at the time. But I would have to say, I think number 1 is actually Jamie XX In Color. That one really holds up. The combination of the UK garage sound with the kind of psychedelic tones, there's just nothing out there quite like it. It just feels like this classic album that is, when everyone talks about the great electronic albums of 2015, Jamie XX is always there, and it still totally holds up, yeah. And that, as such, I decided that's my pick for number 1. I may change my mind on a lot of these later on. So yeah, this was this very off-the-cuff and thing, best albums of the rest of the decade that I didn't already make videos for, or in the case of 2015, did make a video, but just do not like the video that I made. But yeah, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do, is that I'm gonna make Discogs lists of my year-end lists from here on. I'm gonna link all of those for the rest of the decade in the description. Just all the years for the decade, my favorite albums of 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. All that'll be linked in the description. I think I'm gonna do that. So yeah, I don't really know how to end this video. Thanks again for 10,000 subscribers. Hope you enjoyed this avalanche of music recommendations. And shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.